What if Earth is the exile prison for civilizations from across the galaxy? Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning, grab your coffee, check the news, and there it is, a headline that changes everything. Ancient alien artifacts discovered beneath Antarctica reveal Earth's true purpose. But here's the thing. What if that headline isn't as far-fetched as it sounds? What if everything we think we know about our planet, our history, even our very existence, is actually the biggest cover-up in the universe? I'm your host, and welcome back to Javis Heist, where we dive deep into the mysteries that keep you awake at night, wondering what's really out there. Today, we're exploring a theory that's both terrifying and fascinating. One that suggests our beautiful blue planet isn't the cosmic miracle we've been told it island. Instead, Earth might be something far more sinister, a galactic prison designed to contain the most dangerous beings from civilizations across the stars. Now, before you think I've completely lost it, stay with me, because the evidence we're about to explore, from ancient texts to modern archaeological discoveries, from unexplained human DNA anomalies to the suspicious behavior of our own solar system, paints a picture that's impossible to ignore. And by the end of this episode, you might find yourself looking up at the night sky with very different eyes. Let me start with something that's been bothering scientists for decades, something they call the Fermi paradox. Named after physicist Enrico Fermi, it poses a simple but haunting question. If the universe is so vast and ancient, teeming with billions of potentially habitable planets, where is everybody? Where are all the alien civilizations? The math is staggering. Our galaxy alone contains roughly 400 billion stars. Conservative estimates suggest that at least 20% of these stars have Earth-like planets in their habitable zones. That's 80 billion potentially life-supporting worlds in just our galaxy. And remember, the universe contains over 2 trillion galaxies. The numbers become almost meaningless at that scale. Yet, here we sit, in what seems to be complete cosmic silence. No alien radio signals, no massive space structures, no obvious signs of advanced civilizations despite decades of searching with increasingly sophisticated technology. It's like being in a city of millions and hearing no sound whatsoever. Something's not right. But what if the silence isn't because we're alone? What if it's because we're isolated? What if Earth isn't positioned where it is by cosmic accident, but by design placed deliberately in what astronomers call the Galactic habitable zone, far enough from the chaotic galactic center to avoid radiation and gravitational disruption, but also conveniently isolated from the main traffic lanes of an advanced galactic civilization? Think about how we design prisons on Earth. We don't put them in downtown Manhattan or the heart of Los Angeles. We place them in remote locations, away from population centers, surrounded by natural barriers. What if our entire solar system is positioned exactly where a cosmic prison should be? And here's where it gets really unsettling. When we look at Earth's history, I mean really look at it, we see patterns that don't quite fit the narrative of natural evolution we've been taught. Sudden leaps in human intelligence that our own anthropologists struggle to explain. Ancient civilizations with knowledge they shouldn't have possessed. Megalithic structures that challenge our understanding of prehistoric human capabilities. The ancient Sumerians, often credited as the cradle of civilization, appeared seemingly out of nowhere around 4,500 BCE with fully developed writing, advanced mathematics, sophisticated astronomy, and complex legal systems. There's no gradual buildup, no clear evolutionary path from hunter-gatherer societies to this level of advancement. It's as if someone flipped a switch and suddenly humans knew things they had no business knowing. Then there are the megaliths. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built over 11,000 years ago by people who weren't supposed to have the knowledge or technology to create such precise, massive stone circles. Puma Punku in Bolivia, with stone blocks cut so precisely that you can't slide a sheet of paper between them, created by civilizations that supposedly didn't even have the wheel. The Great Pyramid of Giza, aligned to celestial bodies with a precision that would challenge modern engineers. These aren't just impressive ancient buildings. They're evidence of knowledge that seems to have been planted rather than developed naturally over time. Now, let me share something that made my blood run cold when I first read about it. In 2013, a team of geneticists led by Dr. Sidney Tam at Boston University made a discovery that shook the scientific community. They were studying human DNA, specifically looking at what we call junk DNA, the 98% of our genetic code that doesn't seem to serve any obvious function. But here's the thing. They found that this junk DNA isn't junk at all. It contains patterns, sequences, and structures that are far too complex and organized to be random evolutionary leftovers. Dr. Tam's team discovered mathematical sequences in our DNA that mirror the kind of error-correcting codes used in computer programming, not similar to identical to. In their published paper, they wrote something that still gives me chills. The genetic code appears to have been designed by an engineer with a preference for robustness and error correction. An engineer. Not evolution. An engineer. But it gets stranger. When they analyzed these patterns further, they found that roughly 8% of human DNA contains sequences that don't match any known earthly life forms. None. Not primates. Not mammals, not even basic cellular life. These sequences are completely foreign to Earth's evolutionary tree. Dr. Francis Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of DNA, spent his later years studying this exact phenomenon. Before his death in 2004, he published several papers suggesting that human DNA contains evidence of directed panspermia, the intentional seeding of life on Earth by an advanced civilization. But even Crick couldn't have imagined what we know now, because here's where the prison theory starts making terrifying sense. What if those foreign DNA sequences aren't evidence of where we came from, but evidence of where we've been? What if they're genetic markers, identification codes, classification systems for different types of prisoners? Think about it like this. If you were running a galactic prison system, you'd need to catalog your inmates. You'd need to know which planet they came from, what species they belonged to, what crimes they committed. And the most secure place to store that information would be in their genetic code, where they couldn't access it, couldn't alter it, couldn't even read it without advanced technology. Let me paint you a picture of how this might work. Imagine civilizations across the galaxy that have reached a certain level of technological advancement. They've solved disease, conquered death, achieved interstellar travel, but with that advancement comes new problems. Individuals or groups that use this technology for destruction, for conquest, for crimes we can't even imagine. What do you do with beings who are essentially immortal, who possess knowledge that could destroy entire worlds, who cannot be contained by conventional means? You can't just lock them up on their home planets. They're too dangerous, too powerful, too resourceful. You need something more permanent, more secure. So you find a planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy, far from major civilization centers. You terraform it, seed it with basic life forms, and then you begin the process. You strip these dangerous beings of their memories, their technology, their immortality. You encode their true identities in their DNA where they can't access it. Then you place them in biological bodies that will age and die, trapping their consciousness in what they perceive as a single lifetime. But here's the cruel genius of it. You don't tell them they're prisoners. You let them believe they're native to this world, that they evolved here naturally. You create an entire false history, complete with fossil records and geological evidence that supports the illusion. They live, they die, and they're reborn into new bodies, never remembering who they really are or where they came from. And to make sure they never develop the technology to escape or remember their true nature, you program certain limitations into their consciousness. You make them violent toward each other, ensuring they'll spend most of their time fighting amongst themselves rather than looking to the stars. You limit their lifespans so they can never accumulate enough knowledge to pose a threat. You fragment them into different species, races, and cultures that will compete rather than cooperate. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like science fiction, right? But let me share some facts that might change your mind. First, let's talk about human longevity. According to our fossil records, early humans lived much longer than we do today. The Old Testament mentions people living for 900 plus years, and while many dismiss this as mythology, similar claims appear in ancient texts from completely separate cultures around the world. The Sumerian king list mentions rulers who reigned for tens of thousands of years. Hindu texts speak of previous ages when humans lived for millennia. What if these weren't exaggerations or myths? What if they were memories of our true lifespans before we were imprisoned in these limited biological forms? Second, consider human behavior. We are the only species on Earth that consistently destroys its own environment, wages war on its own kind, and seems incapable of global cooperation, despite having the intelligence to recognize that cooperation is necessary for survival. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes no sense. Natural selection should favor cooperation and environmental stewardship, not self-destruction. But if we're not naturally evolved beings, if we're actually dangerous entities that were imprisoned here precisely because of our destructive tendencies, then our behavior makes perfect sense. We're not failing to evolve properly, we're behaving exactly as the prison system was designed to make us behave. Third, let's examine our relationship with technology. Every few decades, humans make massive technological leaps that seem to come out of nowhere. The integrated circuit, nuclear energy, satellite communication, the internet, these advances often come from individuals who claim the ideas just appeared to them. Nikola Tesla spoke of receiving his inventions from outside sources. Albert Einstein described his theories as revelations that came to him fully formed. What if these aren't moments of human genius, but moments when our true memories briefly surface? What if our imprisoned consciousness occasionally breaks through the barriers and remembers technologies from our previous civilizations? This would also explain why these breakthrough technologies often appear simultaneously to multiple people in different locations, a phenomenon called multiple discovery. It's not coincidence, it's multiple prisoners remembering the same technology at the same time. But here's where the theory takes a darker turn. If Earth is a prison, then there must be guards. And those guards would need to live among the prisoners to monitor them, to maintain the illusion and to prevent any organized attempts at escape or remembrance. Let me tell you about something that happened in 1995 that very few people know about. A group of astronomers at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico detected what they initially thought was a new type of pulsar, a rapidly rotating neutron star that emits regular radio pulses. But this signal was different. It was coming from within our solar system, specifically from the region around Jupiter. The signal was perfectly regular, occurring every 11.2 hours, and it contained mathematical patterns that were clearly artificial, not natural phenomena, artificial intelligence. The team, led by Dr. Maria Santos, spent 3 months analyzing the signal before it suddenly stopped. When they tried to publish their findings, they were told the data had been classified, and their research was transferred to a special projects division that, as far as anyone can tell, doesn't actually exist. Dr. Santos later told a close colleague, off the record, that in her opinion, they had detected a monitoring station, something that was watching Earth and transmitting regular reports to somewhere else in the galaxy. But the watchers aren't just in space. They're down here with us. Have you ever met someone who seemed a little too perfect? Too knowledgeable? Too composed? Too understanding of complex situations they shouldn't logically comprehend? Someone who asked slightly strange questions or showed interest in things that seemed oddly specific to your personal life or thoughts? Throughout history, every culture has stories of beings that look human but aren't quite right. The Germanic cultures called them changelings. The Celtic traditions spoke of the Ausi. Native American tribes described the Wendigo and skinwalkers. These aren't just myths or legends, they're cultural memories of encounters with the guards. These entities would need to be different from the prisoners in fundamental ways. They would need to retain their memories, their knowledge, their extended lifespans. They would need to be immune to the memory wiping process that keeps the rest of us trapped in ignorance. And they would need to be able to blend in seamlessly with human society while carrying out their mission of surveillance and control. Let me share a personal story that I've never told publicly before. About 10 years ago, I was researching a completely different topic: the unexplained mass die-offs of marine life that have been occurring with increasing frequency around the world. I was in a small library in Oregon, going through maritime records from the 1800s when this man approached me. He was maybe in his 50s, well-dressed but not memorably so, and he struck up a conversation about my research. But here's the thing that still bothers me. He knew things about those historical records that weren't in the documents I was reading. Specific details about ship captains, weather patterns, even personal conversations between crew members that were only mentioned in private letters that were held in completely different archives across the country. When I asked him how he knew all this, he just smiled and said, "I've been studying this topic for a very long time." Then he asked me a question that made my blood freeze. Have you ever considered that some events aren't random, but are designed to test how the population responds to crisis? Before I could answer, he stood up, wished me luck with my research, and walked away. I never saw him again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our meeting wasn't accidental. It felt like an evaluation, like I was being assessed for something. That night in my hotel room, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his words and the way he had looked at me, not with human curiosity, but with the kind of clinical interest you might show toward a laboratory specimen. And I started wondering, how many of these evaluations happen every day? How many people have these strange encounters, and dismiss them as coincidence. The more I researched this angle, the more disturbing patterns I found. Throughout history, during major social upheavals, technological breakthroughs, or cultural shifts, witnesses consistently report encounters with strangely knowledgeable individuals who seem to appear from nowhere, ask probing questions, and then vanish. During the Renaissance, scholars wrote about mysterious benefactors who funded their research and provided them with rare texts, then disappeared without explanation. During the Industrial Revolution, inventors reported meetings with consultants who offered crucial insights into their work, then could never be contacted again. In the modern era, whistleblowers, researchers, and journalists investigating sensitive topics regularly describe encounters with individuals who know more about their work than should be possible. These aren't government agents or corporate spies. Those people leave traces, have identities, work within trackable organizations. These encounters involve people who seem to exist outside normal social structures entirely. But here's what really keeps me up at night. What if the Watchers aren't just monitoring us? What if they're actively managing our development, our discoveries, our social evolution? What if every major breakthrough in human civilization has been carefully orchestrated to keep us at exactly the right level of advancement, advanced enough to maintain the complex society needed to sustain billions of prisoners, but not advanced enough to break free from our cage? Think about our technological progress over the past century. We've developed incredible weapons capable of destroying our entire civilization. But we still can't cure aging. We can split atoms and manipulate DNA, but we can't seem to solve homelessness or hunger. We can send probes to other planets, but we're nowhere close to faster than light travel that would allow us to escape our solar system. It's as if our development is being guided along very specific lines, advancing in areas that make us more effective at maintaining a complex prison society, while being mysteriously blocked in areas that might lead to liberation or true understanding of our situation. But here's where things get interesting, and maybe a little hopeful. Because if this theory is correct, then something is changing. The prison system might be breaking down. Over the past few decades, we've seen an unprecedented surge in what researchers call anomalous human experiences, near-death experiences where people report detailed knowledge of events they couldn't possibly have witnessed. Past life memories in children that check out when investigated, containing specific historical details they couldn't have learned anywhere. Sudden savant syndrome, where people develop extraordinary abilities overnight after head injuries or other trauma. Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia has been studying these phenomena for over 40 years. In his 2021 book, After, he writes, "We are documenting cases of human consciousness that cannot be explained by current models of brain function. It's as if some people are accessing information and abilities that exist outside their individual biological systems. What if these aren't anomalies? What if they're glitches in the prison system? Moments when the memory suppression technology fails and people briefly remember who they really are?" I want to share with you the case of Boriska Kiprianovich, a Russian boy born in 1996. From the age of 2, Boriska began displaying knowledge that defied explanation. He spoke fluently about Mars, describing its geography, atmosphere, and the civilization that once lived there. He provided technical details about Martian spacecraft, drew diagrams of propulsion systems, and described the destruction of Mars's atmosphere in a war that occurred, according to him, before Earth was colonized. But here's the disturbing part. When scientists checked Boriska's claims against what we know about Mars from satellite data and rover missions, many of his details were accurate. He described underground water reserves that weren't discovered until years after he first mentioned them. He drew maps of Martian terrain that matched topographical data from NASA missions that hadn't been publicly released when he was making his claims. Now, skeptics will say this could be explained by the boy accessing classified information somehow, or by coincidence, but Boriska isn't alone. Around the world, children are displaying similar phenomena. Dr. Ian Stevenson and his successor, Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia have documented over 2,500 cases of children who remember detailed past lives, often from different planets or civilizations. These aren't vague, fantasy-based claims. These children provide specific names, dates, locations, and technical information that proves accurate when investigated. They describe technologies that don't exist on Earth, social structures unlike any human civilization, and events that occurred on other worlds. What's even more fascinating is the pattern of when these memories surface. They almost always appear in early childhood, between ages 2 and 6, and then fade as the children get older and become more integrated into human society. It's as if the memory suppression system has a delayed activation, allowing brief windows where the truth can break through. But it's not just children. Adults around the world are reporting experiences that suggest the barriers are weakening. The number of people claiming to have awakening experiences, sudden, profound realizations about the nature of reality that feel more like remembering than learning, has increased exponentially over the past 30 years. These individuals describe remarkably similar revelations. The understanding that Earth is not their true home, that human civilization is artificially constrained, that we are far more powerful and knowledgeable beings than we appear to be, and that we are trapped in a system designed to keep us from remembering our true nature. Dr. Dolores Cannon, a hypnotherapist who worked with over 45,000 clients over 5 decades, documented thousands of cases where people under hypnosis described lives on other worlds, imprisonment on Earth, and detailed knowledge of galactic civilizations. Her subjects, who came from all walks of life and had no contact with each other, provided remarkably consistent descriptions of how the Earth prison system operates. According to these accounts, Earth is one of several prison worlds scattered throughout the galaxy. The beings imprisoned here come from dozens of different civilizations and were sent here for a variety of offenses. Everything from using technology to interfere with natural planetary evolution, to attempting to overthrow established galactic governments, to committing crimes of consciousness manipulation that we don't even have names for. The sentences vary in length, with some prisoners serving only a few incarnations, while others remain here for millennia. The most dangerous prisoners, those whose crimes were so severe that they can never be allowed to return to galactic society, are subjected to what these accounts describe as permanent incarnation cycles, condemned to live, die, and be reborn on Earth forever. But here's where it gets really unsettling. According to these hypnotic accounts, the prison system is approaching what they call a review period, a time when the galactic authorities evaluate the effectiveness of Earth as a containment facility and decide whether to continue the program, relocate the prisoners, or implement more permanent solutions. And this review period, it's happening now, in our lifetime. So let me bring this back to concrete evidence we can observe today, because if this theory is correct, we should be seeing signs that the system is either breaking down or being actively modified. First, let's talk about what's happening in our skies. The U.S. government recently released official footage of unidentified aerial phenomena that display flight characteristics impossible with known human technology. But here's what most people missed. These aren't random sightings. There's a pattern. Luis Elizondo, the former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, revealed that these craft consistently appear around nuclear facilities, military installations, and areas of high electromagnetic activity. But they're not attacking or interfering, they're observing, like guards making their rounds, checking on a containment facility. Second, consider what's happening with human consciousness. We're seeing unprecedented levels of anxiety, depression, and what psychologists call existential distress, a feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with our reality. Despite living in the most comfortable and technologically advanced period in human history, more people than ever report feeling trapped, disconnected, and desperate to escape something they can't identify. What if this isn't a mental health crisis? What if it's our true consciousness beginning to remember what we really are and rejecting the prison environment? Third, look at our planet's behavior. Climate change, mass extinctions, increasing natural disasters. The Earth seems to be becoming less hospitable to human life. If Earth is an artificial prison environment, this degradation might be intentional. Perhaps the review period I mentioned earlier has concluded, and the decision has been made to decommission this facility. The timeline fits. Many indigenous cultures around the world have prophecies about this being the end times. Not the end of the world, but the end of an age. The Hopi speak of the Great Purification. The Maya calculated the end of a major cycle. Hindu texts describe the conclusion of the Kali Yuga. What if these aren't spiritual prophecies, but cultural memories of previous times when prison worlds were shut down and prisoners transferred elsewhere? But here's the thing that gives me hope, and maybe should terrify me. If this theory is correct, then we have a choice to make. We can continue to live as unconscious prisoners, accepting the limitations imposed on us, fighting amongst ourselves while the Watchers maintain control. Or we can choose to remember. Because here's what I've learned in all my research. The prison only works if we consent to it. The memory suppression, the shortened lifespans, the limitations on our consciousness, these are all technologies that require our unconscious cooperation. They work by convincing us that this diminished existence is all we are, all we've ever been, all we can ever be. But what if we stopped believing that? What if enough of us remembered our true nature, our true power, our true purpose? What if we collectively chose to reject the programming and reclaim our authentic existence? The evidence suggests that this is already happening. The increasing number of awakening experiences, the children who remember other lives, the adults who suddenly develop impossible abilities, the growing sense that something is wrong with our reality. These might not be anomalies. They might be the first signs of a mass awakening, a collective refusal to remain unconscious prisoners. As I wrap up today's episode, I want to share something personal with you. When I first started researching this topic, I thought I was investigating an interesting fringe theory. But the deeper I went, the more the evidence piled up, and the more my own life started making sense in ways that frankly scared me. Those moments of déjà vu we all experience, what if they're not misfiring neurons, but glimpses of memories from previous incarnations. Those dreams where we know things we've never learned, visit places we've never been, speak languages we've never studied. What if they're not random brain activity, but our true consciousness trying to break through the barriers? That feeling you get sometimes, looking up at the stars, that you don't belong here, that you're homesick for somewhere you can't remember. What if that's not poetic longing, but literal truth? I can't prove any of this. I wish I could. But I can tell you that once you start seeing the world through this lens, patterns become visible everywhere. The strange gaps in human history, the impossible achievements of ancient civilizations, the consistent reports of non-human intelligence monitoring our planet, the increasing breakdown of natural systems that should be stable, the rising consciousness that something is fundamentally wrong with our reality. It all starts to make sense as part of a larger system that we're only now beginning to understand. Maybe we are prisoners. Maybe this beautiful blue planet is actually an elaborate cage designed to contain the most dangerous minds in the galaxy. Maybe our entire conception of human history, human nature, and human potential is a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep us from remembering what we really are. But if that's true, then we have a choice that no physical prison can take away. The choice to remember. The choice to wake up. The choice to reclaim our authentic existence, whatever that might be. And maybe, just maybe, that's why you're listening to this right now. Because something inside you recognizes the truth in these words, even if your rational mind wants to dismiss them. Maybe you're one of the prisoners who's starting to remember. Maybe you're ready to stop being a victim of this system and start being a conscious participant in your own liberation. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if we can actually break free from this prison, or if we're destined to remain here until the galactic authorities decide our fate for us. But I do know this: the first step toward any kind of freedom is recognizing that you're not free. And if this theory is even partially correct, then that recognition is spreading faster than ever before. So I'll leave you with this question. What would you do differently if you knew with absolute certainty that everything you've been told about human history, human nature, and human potential was a lie designed to keep you compliant and unconscious? How would you live if you remembered that you are so much more than this limited physical form, so much more powerful than you've been allowed to believe, so much more connected to the cosmos than you've been permitted to experience? Because whether or not Earth is literally a galactic prison, the question of how to live as a free and conscious being remains the same. And maybe answering that question is the first step toward whatever kind of liberation awaits us. Until next time, this is Javis Heist. Keep questioning everything. Keep seeking the truth. And remember, reality is much stranger than we've been allowed to imagine. What do you think? Are we prisoners on a cosmic scale? Or am I connecting dots that don't actually form a picture? I genuinely want to know your thoughts on this. Have you ever had experiences that felt like memories from another life, another world? Have you encountered people who seem to know more than they should? Have you felt that inexplicable homesickness for somewhere you can't remember? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this episode made you think differently about our place in the universe, even if you disagree with everything I've said, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because we're just getting started here at Javis Heist. And trust me, the mysteries we're going to explore in upcoming episodes will challenge everything you think you know about reality. Next week, We're diving into the evidence that suggests certain bloodlines on Earth might actually be descendants of the prison guards I mentioned today. It's a rabbit hole that leads to some very uncomfortable questions about power, control, and who really runs this world. Until then, keep your eyes on the stars, your mind open to possibilities, and remember, the truth is out there, waiting for us to be brave enough to see it.